Blog Talk Radio.
No risk it, no biscuit.
Coming from the Arizona desert, presented by SBNation.com. For Arizona Cardinals fans, by Arizona Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider's perspective, this is Revenge of the Birds. Good evening, Arizona Cardinals fans. This is the Revenge of the Birds radio podcast / show. And it's a Tuesday night, and it's a great Tuesday night. Why? Because the Arizona Cardinals won on Sunday, defeating the Carolina Panthers 22-6, improving their record to 3-2 on the season. And so I'm your host, Jess Root. I've got Ben on the line. Good evening, Ben. How are you doing?
Hey, everybody. I'm doing good. How are you, Jess?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here tonight. After a week off, that was a little bit of a crazy week. I'd like to apologize to you, Ben, to everyone involved that we didn't do a show last week. My other jobs that I have kind of got in the way, made things very stressful, very tiring, and I just couldn't put it together. So I apologize for that. We're going to try and not make that a habit. But if you, Arizona Cardinals fans, if you want to talk Arizona Cardinals football, talk about the game on Sunday, talk about the upcoming game on this Sunday, give us a call, 646-478-3787. Give us a call, again. You can also, if you're unable to get to a phone, I do have my TweetDeck app up on my computer, so you can actually tweet me as well. Either tweet me on my personal Twitter, mention me at Senor Jess Root, or at the site account, at Revenge of Birds. So we're going to get started tonight. It's a great, 3-2. I can imagine that you would say, Ben, is this a pleasant surprise to be 3-2? Is it what you expected? Is it not quite what you wanted so far?
I'm happy with it. I'm happy to have the wins, absolutely. Wish it was a little bit prettier on the field, but I'm glad they're getting it done, you know. They've kind of snuck in a couple wins, and they're in a good position to kind of attack the rest of the season, so hey.
Yeah, they definitely did that, and based on the preseason expectations, I know that first 4 games set, 2-2 I think was was a generous thing. I know probably a lot of people had 1-3, and so to be 3-2 is probably a little bit ahead of where people expected. We're going to talk about the upcoming next 4 games over the next 5 weeks, which is, if you look at it on paper, is going to be a pretty brutal schedule. But let's talk about a little bit about the game as we had happen on Sunday. Cardinals pull away with a 22-6 victory. The scoreboard makes it look like it was more or less, it wasn't terribly close, but even though it was very close up until the last couple of minutes of the game, the Cardinals did not look good on either side of the ball to start the game in the first half. Cam Newton was moving the Panthers up and down the field. It seemed almost at will. They were not superb in their rush defense. They allowed, 74 yards by halftime. Even still, thanks to a very crucial drop in the end zone of an easy pass by Steve Smith. And, some good plays on the defensive, some timely plays. It led to the Panthers leading only 6-3 at halftime. And then the second half happened much like the half went in Tampa Bay. The Arizona Cardinals made some adjustments, and their defense was fantastic. They ended up giving up. They did not give up a single point in the second half. They only allowed 21 rushing yards in the second half. They allowed, I think, 93 yards it was in the second half of total offense. It was a dominating performance, just incredible. They sacked Cam Newton during the course of the game. They sacked him 7 times, intercepted him 3 times, forced a fumble there at the end of the game. It was not only as a team, but individually. You had some very good individual performances. You had Darrell Washington and Carlos Dansby, both of them together almost looking like, well, I don't want the other to do better. Carlos Dansby got off the quick start. He got a couple of sacks. Darrell Washington got a couple of sacks. Darrell Washington had the interception. And Carlos Dansby at the end, he himself got himself an interception. So you had almost identical stat lines, 8 tackles, 2 sacks, a pick. Then you had Calais Campbell with a pair of sacks. 1 sack went for a safety, 1 forced a fumble. You had Tyrann Mathieu pick up his first sack of his young career. You had Patrick Peterson pick off a pass that was intended for Steve Smith that if he does not, the throw, it was underthrown. But he does not make that play, it could be a touchdown. Individually, it was a fantastic performance, and as a team, you get to see it again. And the Cardinals win ugly because on the other side of the ball, it was more or less ugly for most of the game. Carson Palmer picked off 3 times, not giving him, and he threw a touchdown late. Said that was that last score. It was really a very close game. It was 12-6, and just the 1 point, just the 1 score difference until the Cardinals were able to put on another 3 points. Jay Feely kicking a 50-yard field goal to make it 15-6, really kind of putting it out of reach, and you felt, hey, that's the ball game. And then the icing on the cake was that sack fumble by Campbell, which eventually led to a touchdown pass from Carson Palmer to Jim Dre late in the game. So the Cardinals win. They're 3-2. Their offense looks terrible, except in a couple of drives. And I think that's the difference between this year and last year. You look at the Cardinals and how they're winning. They're winning with defense, and they're winning with timely offense. It's kind of like the baseball equivalent of winning with pitching and defense and getting timely hitting. The Cardinals are not doing well on offense at all, but they're putting together, it seems, every game just enough. They just one touchdown drive here, a couple of field goals there, and that does the trick. They beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers like that. They beat the Lions like that. They beat the Panthers like that. It's really becoming a theme, is that the offense is not much improved over last year, but they are doing just enough. And so what we're going to be talking about tonight, a little bit of discussion, is related to the game, because we had a couple of big things happen over the last week. One, the big thing was that there was a big change in this offense, and that is, some will call it addition by subtraction. Some will say simply good riddance. And some will say, interesting. When they traded the embattled left tackle, Levi Brown, to the Pittsburgh Steelers. At first, it looked like, wow, we fleeced the Steelers. They got him for a late-round pick. Then the news came out. Oh, we're paying almost all of his salary. Okay, that's not so bad. Then it came out after that. Not only is it the Cardinals they paid him almost all of his salary. It's a swap of picks, okay. But it shows that they were willing, that they were on the verge of releasing him. They were just going to cut him, pay him the rest of his salary for this year, and let him go. This way they move up in the draft with swap with the Steelers. And then we're left. They left Bruce Arians turns over the duties of left tackle to a guy that the Colts picked up last year, an undrafted free agent that they picked up off of waivers, was Bradley Sowell. Yes, it's pronounced Sowell. He said so himself on Arizona Sports Today in a radio interview, despite the fact that when he was first signed by the Cardinals, Bruce Arians called him Bradley Soul. And as a result, I was calling him Bradley Soul for weeks until today when Sowell himself was on the radio. So Bradley Sowell takes over left tackle. And he doesn't do terribly. He doesn't do well. He isn't terribly. And I'm going to let you, Ben. We're going to let Ben, because he's been beating on the Levi Brown drum for some time, and he might feel a little empty now. He might feel a little bit empty inside because there's no more Levi Brown drum to beat. So, what do you think of the trade? How glad are you that Levi's gone? And do you think Bradley Sowell can hold up? And do you think he can hold up and be the guy long term?
Oh man, well, you can probably guess that I'm in the good riddance column. I was pretty happy with the trade. Just to get anything out of Levi, I think was a positive move by the front office. Yeah, we picked up a lot of the contract, but you look at it, I think part of that was just bookkeeping, really, from the Graves era, just trying to clear cap by that 2015 goal that Keem kind of has, Steve Keem, general manager, where he thinks we'll be in a pretty good position cap-wise by 2015. And if that means, eating some contracts this year and next year for some of the bad deals, that we've been stuck with, and then so be it, I would say.
Now,
so that pretty much made my week, the Brown trade.
So what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do with the signature on your screen name? Are you gonna have to take down that quote by Ben Muth? Take it down finally?
I think I did. I think it's gone. I tried to take it down. I'll have to double check, but yeah, definitely.
So is there an emptiness inside now? Is there an emptiness for no longer Levi Brown being who are you going to bag on now? Who's to blame? Or is it Carson Palmer now? Are we moving on to Carson Palmer?
I definitely need a new whipping boy. I haven't figured it out yet. Palmer's making a case. He definitely is. I'm sure we'll get into that.
Now, you wrote a piece last week, didn't you, for the site that was kind of scouting. Well, I think it was both you and Seth put a piece together on Bradley Sowell. What did you see, and what do you see as perhaps the future he has at the position, or is he simply going to be what many think he will be, just a table setter, a place setter, until the draft next year or until free agency? Because here in the local media, it seemed to be that was going to be what is going to happen, that the Cardinals want to be a player in free agency. The name Brandon Albert came up. Do you see Sowell as simply being that, or perhaps will he show enough that the Cardinals will ride with him next year?
Well, for now he's definitely a placeholder, but it's kind of on him to show us that he's going to be more than that. From what I watched of him last season with Indianapolis, he's definitely the same guy. They didn't put someone else in a Sowell jersey and throw him out there. He has a lot of the same problems right now that he had with Indy last year, and he didn't play much. But the one thing that you'll definitely notice that we saw against Carolina, and that we're really accustomed to seeing as Cardinal fans, he gets beat to the edge just all the time. Outside speed rushers, he really struggles to get out there and meet them and put a stop to it. But again, that's something that we're pretty much used to. Brown did it all the time. Winston does it occasionally. I mean, name a left tackle that plays for the Cardinals or has played, and I think they all have that same issue. So,
not Lomas
the other
Brown.
thing
We had one good one. He was Lomas Brown, and he was at the end of his career, and then we let him go.
It's been a while. I pretty much go back to Gandy, and anyone since then has been a little bit rough. And
when Gandy was here, no one liked him either. He did just enough, but nobody liked Gandy when he was here.
Yep. Another problem I think with Sowell is that he's not the kind of blocker that's going to latch onto you and just never let you go. He needs to call up Jay Glazer and do some MMA training or something, because he's just not quite physical enough. He doesn't know what to do with his hands, it seems like. But other than that, I kind of like him. He avoids a lot of the mental errors that we've kind of gotten used to. I don't think he had a penalty, which is a first this season for our left tackle. He blocks pretty well at the point of attack. He in the game against Carolina, he definitely had a couple nice pancake blocks where he just kind of ran his guy out of the play and sat down on him. It was nice to see. A big thing with tackles is that experience is really going to help him, I think. You look at a lot of the rookie tackles that were taken in the first round, and they're struggling too. So, first start, it could have been a lot worse, and I think he improved as the game went on, which is pretty much the key for Sowell this season. He just needs to get better. Each week he needs to keep working. No one expected him to be great, and he's not right now. But maybe he can improve and be a piece for the Cardinals moving forward. We'll see. If it's up to me, if I'm the coach, the GM, or whatever, I'll start him again. He did well enough. We have 3 weeks to the bye week, and I would probably keep him in until then, barring complete disaster. But if he's not showing improvement by then, I might think about switching to Potter just for evaluation, because if Sowell doesn't improve, he's probably not going to be with the team next year. And I think at that point it would be worth seeing what Potter can do and kind of making a final decision on him too.
Potter's an interesting case. In fact, kind of pretty much everybody that the last regime drafted, even though, which is interesting because Steve Keim was part of that. He wasn't the decision maker, but he was certainly part of that. Almost every single one of those guys that Wisenhunt and Graves drafted over the past couple of years is just gone or just not used. and Nate Potter's one of those cases. Here with the start of last year, Coach Arians talks him up, how great a camp he was having, and then suddenly he's no longer starting. He's not only starting, then he gets relegated to the guard, the swing backup behind Sowell. And then you've got Massey the same. But I think that they're just not completely sold on Potter, which is really interesting. And it maybe simply is the fact that Sowell was running the offense, was with the offense that the Colts did last year, and so he's not going to have the same mistakes. Personally, what I liked about Sowell is, and he was on an interview today on a local radio here in Phoenix, and he's a little bit different than Levi Brown in this sense. Levi Brown is not an intense man, and you can tell when he interviews. He's a very articulate man. He's a very intelligent man. But he's not intense. He's very laid back in his interviews. And I don't want to give off the impression that I think he's lazy, because I do not. I don't think the guy is lazy. I don't think he would have been a starter on the offensive line for as long as he was if he were lazy. He just doesn't play intensely. There was a story a while back I heard on the radio by Ron Wolfley. If you hear the radio, he's one of the Cardinals broadcasters. He's also a local radio personality as well, one of the guys on a local radio show here in Phoenix. And he says that something happened once, and Levi Brown got mad, and then he was absolutely mauling guys. And the defensive players, the offensive players are like, whoa, and that you don't want to mess with an angry Levi Brown. But the problem was, Levi didn't play angry. And there's a lot of people who believe that to play football well, Wolfley calls it tapping into the rage tree. Brown didn't do that. And so he would do his job. He would do it as best he possibly could without the intensity. And Sowell's different. Sowell is intense. He's very passionate about his work. And so he's going to fight and fight and fight on the field. And that's kind of like, I think with the left tackle, there are so few just absolutely great left tackles that no one is really going to be entirely pleased. You really only need a capable left tackle in the league anymore with the offenses the way they are, just to do enough to keep the quarterback clean. You don't need a fantastic guy. And Sowell, I think, can do that, because if he loses his guy for a second, he doesn't give up. He's agile enough that he can get back and still fight. So while it might not look pretty, he's still going to keep the guy off of the quarterback. And he himself said he's not the super strongest guy, but with that heart and that intensity he plays with, he knows he has to work harder than anyone else. And I think that's the key thing. Do I think he's the long-term answer? I doubt it. I think that the Cardinals, first and foremost, are going to be going into next year's draft trying to grab a quarterback, and I think they're going to try and grab an elite, a top-end tackle. On a separate note, the injury to Jonathan Cooper that put him out the season, ended up moving during college back to the left side, I think that actually is going to help Sowell in this case, rather than having two essential rookies on the left side of the offensive line, as bright as Cooper is and how good he was. I think it's going to benefit that Sowell will benefit from having college on the left side than, say, if it were Cooper on that side, because of protections and just what they would see. What do you think of that?
I think that's a good detail about the intensity, because when you watch him, he's definitely active. He keeps moving. He keeps himself in the play, and he's always looking for someone to block. Like you said, even when he's beaten, or even when he's pulling, or when he's just getting out in motion, he's always looking for someone to block. He doesn't always find someone, but he's always trying, and I think that's a good quality to have. talent-wise, yeah, he's probably just a backup in the NFL. But he hasn't played much. We'll see how he looks in a couple of weeks when he has some more experience. As for playing next to college, yeah, I could definitely see that. Experience is always a good thing, especially on the O-line. It takes them a while to gel, and having a guy next to you that can cover up for you a little bit and that kind of knows already what to expect will definitely help. But Sal did play in this system before in Arizona too, so he's not completely fresh himself, which will help.
So we've got the new offensive line change. In fact, he did all right. Sal did fine. And what was fun is that he lined up against his former college teammate in Greg Hardy, and Hardy is a dang good player. He's that front seven, and we're going to move on to the next guy. Carson Palmer himself, before the game and after the game, was very complimentary of that front four, calling that Carolina front four probably the best one in football. He mentioned the Seahawks. They said this probably, but probably still that the Panthers front four is the best in the NFL. Would you say that's probably accurate? Would you agree? I based on the production they got, they normally get, I would say definitely yes. And the fact that the Cardinals were able to defeat them with that, despite that, especially with the offensive line problems they have, is really a testament to how things are actually better than last year offensively.
I think I would wait till the end of the season before deciding that. They definitely have the production right now. They have the talent, but they have young players. Starr and is it K'Wan Short is the other defensive tackle? Those guys are both really young. Really, they're all pretty young. I think Johnson is probably in his prime. But yeah, I mean, they are really good. They're really talented. They're tough to deal with. I was impressed that we were able to get out of there. I think we only gave up one sack, which was impressive. There were a lot of pressures and hits. And it's not like Palmer played well, but yeah, it's definitely a strong front seven. It could be the best we see all year. I kind of hope it is.
Yeah, we talked about pressure. We're going to talk about Carson Palmer next as we move on to who possibly could become our next whipping boy for the season. We no longer have Levi Brown to blame. Folks, Arizona Cardinals fans. We can't blame Levi Brown anymore. He's the Steelers' problem. And from the Steelers fans I've talked to, they have no idea why they traded for him. Obviously, they're in a dire situation as well with their offensive line. They could not, for the life of them, understand why in the world they would trade for Brown. But let's move on to Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer had a bad game, to say the least. He threw the one touchdown late, but he had 3 interceptions. One that was on a flea flicker when he was throwing the deep ball, underthrown. Bruce Arians said that Michael Floyd should have knocked that ball away at least. But that one is more on Michael Floyd. The other 2 throws were when Palmer was trying to force a ball into Larry, is what he called a heroic throw, a high-risk, low-reward pass when there were other guys open. Sean Church on our site, he went through and he was looking back at him. The first one was overthrown. The second one was thrown, a tad early or tad late. It was just, the timing was just off. And then the other one was just not a good read. In that case, when they had the linebacker, he was trying to force it to Larry in that situation to get him to score. The issue that we have right now with Carson Palmer is that after 5 games, he's thrown 9 interceptions, and at least 1 interception every single game. And statistically, I brought up the stat a couple of weeks ago on the last show that we did, is how his stats are regressing each game. I'll have to compare that again, but everything, his completion percentage, his touchdowns, his interceptions, it was all regressing, his yards per attempt. I'll have to look at that again, but what I find the most interesting and the most troubling is the fact that he has 9 interceptions in 5 games. There has never been a season when he's thrown more than that. And Carson Palmer has the reputation for being a guy that throws interceptions. That is his reputation. He throws interceptions, and then he's really lucky, and somehow he avoids interceptions on throws that should be, but they just get dropped. He's never thrown more than 20 in a season, and he's done that twice. He did that in 2007, and he did that in 2010. However, in every single season, if we look at the touchdowns, there have only been 2 seasons in his career in which he threw more interceptions than touchdowns. That was 2008 when he played 4 games, and 2011 when he did not play the full season with Oakland, when he played 10 games, starting 9. Those are the only 2 seasons in which he's thrown more interceptions than touchdowns. At this rate, he's either going to have to go on an incredibly hot streak, an incredibly effective streak, or one of the 2 things is he's either going to surpass his interception rate, the highest that he's thrown, or he's going to end up with more interceptions than touchdowns. He's going to have to start producing in big ways to avoid that, and that's really kind of distressing to me, and it worries me because supposedly this offense was a perfect match to Carson Palmer's skill set. With the skill players that he supposedly has, he's got Larry Fitzgerald, he's got Michael Floyd, he's got Andre Roberts, he has the well, that's another topic. Rob Hausler is supposed to be great, and he has not. He's playing the worst football. Honestly, it's the worst football of his career, honestly, based on what we're seeing. At what point, how concerned are you, Ben, and what should we do? Should the Cardinals continue to ride the Palmer horse? Or do we need to make a change? At what point do we make a change? Do we go to Drew Stanton? Obviously, Arians is confident enough in Stanton. That's who they brought in first. What is your concern level?
It's getting up there. I'm awfully concerned. I glanced at his stats earlier, and I think this is the lowest QB rating performance that he's had so far this season. So I think you were right about the pace that he's been setting. It gets worse every game. So yeah, I'm a little bit worried. Arians said he's not into sending messages with his, trades and roster moves and stuff. But I think anytime you move an underperforming player like Brown was, I think it sends a message. So, I think the offense would have been motivated this week. So at this point, if they're not playing well, it's probably because they're just not very good. It's frustrating to watch, but it's a lot of stupid throws into coverage, and he's been doing this all year. You can talk about the first one with Michael Floyd where they call a jump ball and Michael Floyd doesn't really jump. I mean, yeah, maybe they're not really on the same page there, but if the ball's not underthrown, it's a touchdown, and there's no way the corner can even get his hands on it. So,
and his deep ball has not been good this year. He's not been good on the deep ball, which is kind of the reason why Arians brought him in. Said he's got the arm strength, but he just hasn't been effective. I will throw this stat out there. This is courtesy of Sean Church, who tweeted this to me. And with among all the Palmer hate that we're feeling and the Palmer worry and I was just doing this to stir this up, but during the game, after it was second, I can't remember the second or third interception by Palmer, I tweeted during the game and said, at what point do Cardinals fans start calling for Drew Stanton? That wasn't meant to say, hey, let's start calling for Drew Stanton. It kind of started happening a little bit. Not necessarily. I was just stirring the pot a little bit. At what point do we say, hey, let's go with the backup? But Sean has a stat out here that is actually a fairly important stat, that where Palmer is not being an abject failure. In the last 2 games and in the fourth quarter, neither which of those games did he perform well on the whole. In the fourth quarter, he's 13 of 19 for 120 yards, so he's completing almost 70% of his passes at 120 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interception. He hasn't been sacked. His passer rating's at 120. Now, can you trust a quarterback who performs so inconsistently and so actually not very good for the first 3 quarters, but does solid in the fourth quarter? Tell me about that, those who follow Tim Tebow, those who were John Skelton fans. That is not sustainable. It's a great stat, and it is one thing that's very important about Palmer. He doesn't get rattled when it comes to the situation, which is one fact that he's really laid back. He's very cool. He doesn't have the same fiery thing that he gets taken over by his emotion. He's not Jay Cutler. He's not Phillip Rivers. He doesn't let the moment take him over. He does dumb things from time to time, but he does calm down and can perform late in the game. My concern, that's not something you can count on, because if a guy's inconsistent for 3 quarters, guess what's going to crop up in the fourth quarter? He's going to do dumb things then too. Can we ride this Palmer? After 5 games, are we seeing an over-the-hill Palmer? Are we seeing someone who's struggling with the offense? Or is it going to turn around, and is he going to turn around and put numbers that he's normally done? What can we expect?
If he's not playing well, eventually you're going to have to make a change. We did it at left tackle. I mean, if it continues, I think this way, we probably will have to at quarterback as well. I don't know when, maybe the bye week. If we start losing games consistently, if the fourth quarter magic wears off, like it kind of did with Skelton there, after his one season that wasn't completely awful, then you're definitely going to have to make a change. I don't know. He's doing enough. I can't even say he's doing enough to win, honestly. Like he is, but it's more on the defense, and we're used to winning ugly, but something eventually will have to change, I think, if they don't improve. Maybe it's at some point the receivers, are going to have to stop taking the blame, because I understand that the offense needs to gel and everyone needs to be on the same page, but Palmer is he's throwing into coverage, he's missing guys. I don't know when you do it, but maybe you look at the bye week but I think with San Fran and Seattle coming up, those are games you're definitely going to want to win. So if Palmer struggles against San Fran, are you going to want to try him again against Seattle next week? I don't think so.
But by the same token, would you want to make a change on a short week to Drew Stanton? Would you want to put him in that situation because that's a short week. They'll be playing on Thursday night. If the Palmer doesn't play well against San Francisco, it doesn't make any sense to change Drew there, because you've got a really short week, so you're going to change quarterbacks and do that in a condensed week. That's really tough, especially against that Seattle defense.
Yeah, you're right about that. That'd probably be just as much of a disaster, even if you did make a change. I think you'd probably want to look at it at the bye week, because it'll give him a little bit more time to prepare. The thing with Palmer, he has a body of work. He's never really been this bad before in his career. I don't know, maybe there were certain stretches where he really struggled. So, but I think we should be able to expect him to turn things around, just because he has the experience, and he's never really quite. He had those 2 seasons there where he threw a few more picks than touchdowns, but even those, there were different circumstances there. He was traded, he didn't play a full season, etc. So
yeah, that's the thing.
Turn it around at some point.
Really, personally, I believe that guys end up showing you what they are. Guys end up showing you the type of players they are. The law of average is what it is. Their ability comes out. In baseball, it happens all the time. A guy that normally hits around 300 starts out the year terribly. Guess what's going to happen? He's going to bring it around, and he's going to bat around 300 unless his skills have regressed. Carson Palmer, who's played for some bad teams, he's put up the numbers consistently, always more touchdowns than interceptions, always solid completion percentage, solid, lots of yards. Another stat from Sean Church, he just sent me, and it's about how quarterbacks have done under Bruce Arians' offense in their first 5 games. And if you look across the board, Palmer has done, he's done roughly around the same. Ben Roethlisberger did the best, and that was in 2007. In his first 5 games, they were 4-1, had a quarterback rating of 99.2, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And you could tell they were throwing the ball down the field. He averaged 7.7 yards per attempt. Completed 61% of his passes. Tim Couch in 2001, now granted there is a talent disparity there, though Tim Couch is supposed to be the bee's knees. He, in the first 5, in Cleveland, his first 5 games, they were 3-2, QB rating to 80, 6 touchdowns, 4 picks, threw for 960 yards. He had the least yards of that group. Last year, Andrew Luck was 2-3 to start the season. He had 7 touchdowns, 7 picks, almost 1,500 yards passing, completed only 53% of his passes. And Palmer so far, completing almost 59% of his passes, but he has had the most turnovers with the least amount of touchdowns, 5 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, a rating of only 67, and a win-loss of 3.2. 3-2, that is. My guess is one of two things. As much as I think Carson Palmer is going to have to be absolutely awful, and the team is losing a lot of ball games before we can make a change to Drew Stanton. Bruce Arians doesn't like to make quarterback changes. That's the one that you don't mess around with. And I think you have to expect, unless he is over the hill, unless he's lost that ability to play quarterback at the level that he's played in his career, that he's going to come around. That doesn't mean I don't think he's going to. We're going to see probably maybe more of a 20 touchdown, 20 interception campaign, or 22-20. I think it will come around. But and Sean just chimed in right here, is that the main point is if your team isn't losing because of him, you can't bench Palmer. True. You can't bench him if they're winning. However, can you expect the team to win with that play? It's hard to do, and it's definitely a major concern. So while you don't make the change, it's definitely something to be worried about. Something that will help Carson Palmer immensely, and this will go on to the next topic, is that it's about the running game. In fact, one of the more puzzling things the past couple of games is it seems the complete forgetting of the running game. We've talked about this before with you, with Seth, on previous shows, is that Bruce Arians, well, we saw it in New Orleans, a really good balance of run and pass on that first drive, scripted, score a touchdown, easy peasy. Then what? Well, looks like they ran out of running plays, and then he goes back to, okay, we're going to pass the ball. They don't run the ball. They attempted 6 running plays in the first half. They were not doing well offensively. And the second half, I don't know what it was. The puzzling thing is, that's the puzzling thing for me. What is it that makes them start running the ball? Is it because they have a couple of good runs? I know Ken Wisenhunt would try to run a couple times. Oh, they didn't get game 1. They'd do a loss of 2. And then say, well, that's not working, so we're going to do something else. And just forget about it. You have to commit to it. In the second half, here's the touchdown drive. Here's the touchdown drive. You want to know, out of those plays, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plays that they scored on that touchdown drive when Rashard Mendenhall drove it in, there were 7 running plays. And the final 5 were on the ground. Now, their first running play, their first 2, the first one went for 2 yards, then for 1 yard. Then after that went for 4 yards. Then was the Ellington play for 26. Then 5, then 6, then the score. In fact, the very next drive, so they had 7 out of 10 plays of that drive were running. The next 2, so in the last 5, over that stretch, they ran the ball 7 straight times. The last 5 with the touchdown, the first 2 of the next drive, where they ran the ball twice, passed the ball, ran the ball, then passed the ball again, and that was picked off. And so the Cardinals are having success. In fact, if we trace back to their scoring drives, what are they doing when they score? They are running the ball effectively. Is that because they're running effectively, or because they're committing to the run? That's the hard part about this. Why don't the Cardinals run the ball more when they've been effective, and when their scoring drives have come when they've run the ball effectively?
That is the question that everyone has been asking, isn't it? Oh man, if only we had an answer. I think a little bit of it is probably that what we saw with Ken Wisenhunt that you mentioned. They run it twice, and they stopped us. We better just throw it the rest of the game now. I think we have a little bit of that because Mendenhall really hasn't been getting it done after the first couple of weeks. He's good for about 2 yards a run, and they're insistent on sticking with him, which is it's okay. But part of it is the Arians offense. Apparently, he just wants to spread people out. He likes going with the empty sets. 5 wide. Why not? Let's see what Palmer can do. Oh, picked. Darn. But I think our play caller, Bruce, might be a sociopath. It takes 3 picks and a 50% completion percentage for him to decide to call some runs. I know why they did it in Carolina at the end there. Finally, was because, A, Palmer was struggling, and B, we needed to control the clock. But why they don't go to it earlier in the game, I really have no idea. You have the stable of backs that you're happy with. you got 5 on the roster, and again, they're still just not using them that much. It's baffling. It really is.
Well, which leads us to talk a little bit about the whole running game situation. His quote yesterday, because the media did ask him about running the ball, because it was so drastic. They went from running the ball 6 times in the first half to turning around, and at the end of the game, they had run the ball. They had attempted 28 running plays. Now, granted, 3 of those were the kneel downs at the end of the game. So they went from attempting 6 rushes in the first half to attempting 19 rushes in the second half before the final 3 kneel downs. And so it was really quite drastic. It was really quite drastic, the change. And the question is, well, we have to run the ball more, or can you be a good running team? And Bruce Arians said straight up, I don't think, and his words were, I don't think with the guys that we have that we can be a dominant running team. He doesn't think that they're going to be a team like an Adrian Peterson or Houston when they had both Arian Foster and Ben Tate just churning up yards, or Seattle. He doesn't believe that they're going to be a dominant running team, and what he looks for is balance. Do you think that's a slight with the personnel that they have, or is that simply the realistic thing that they're never going to be dominant running the ball? They just have to do it successful enough when they want to pass the ball, because they're going to have a passing offense. Or should they attempt to be a better running team? Which way do you think that they should go?
Well, I think it's going to be pass first, regardless of the personnel, because I think that's just the way that Arians operates. They need to do a better job running it, yes. There's just not enough space there for Mendenhall to really do anything, and a lot of that is on Mendenhall, but they can still do a little bit better, upfront blocking with it. And I think you look at the tight ends. Dre has struggled a little bit as a blocker. We don't have a fullback, but that's just the scheme. And then we lost Cooper, and he was going to be a big part of that running. And I think him next to Brown, we would have actually been a pretty good running team, at least off of the left side. But obviously both of those players are gone right now. So that's just not a possibility. College, throughout his career, has been more of a pass blocker. We really don't have the personnel, especially when Mendenhall is your feature back, to be a top rushing team. But they definitely need to commit to it more. They need to do enough to take some of the pressure off of our linemen, in the passing game, just so that we can get that going a little bit better. Because if that's going to be the focus of your offense, it needs to work. It hasn't been working. You can help yourselves with that by running it better, and they haven't. They just need to commit to it. Not every run is going to be 10, 15 yards. Obviously, you just got to grind it out a little bit more than they have.
Now, are you in the camp that says Andre Ellington needs more carries? Andre Ellington, he played 30 snaps on Sunday's game. He carried the ball 7 times. He caught the ball 4 times. So he had 11 touches. He had 83 yards from scrimmage. He had the 26-yard run. He's being used both as a running back and a receiver. Bruce Arians, when the media was talking to him yesterday, said that he doesn't see him. He doesn't think that his body type is going to be. He's going to be a lead dog runner, is what he said. He's not going to be a lead dog runner with the body type that he has, and so they view him as a runner and receiver. So they have him running. In fact, right now he is kind of playing the role of the 4th receiver rather than bringing Jerron Brown in. They've been using Ellington in empty sets when there's no one in the backfield. They'll have him out wide at receiver. They'll have Fitz, Floyd, and Roberts, and then Hausler is when they have empty backfields. And then they use Ellington a lot as their 4th receiver. Do you think Ellington needs to carry the ball more? If it were up to you, would you have him do more for the running game and a little bit less in the passing game, and perhaps get more production out of the running game? And they're using him not very much. They don't use him much on the inside. He is an able runner inside, but they're using him a lot on the edge, on end-around type things where he's in motion. He takes the hand up around the end. What would you do with Andre Ellington?
I'm pretty happy with how they're using him right now. He's got burst. He makes people miss. He's really fun to watch, especially in the first 3 quarters where everyone else on offense is totally inept. He's about the only bright spot. So, I'm a big fan, but if they don't think he's going to be if they don't think he'd hold up to more carries, that's fine. I think that's a valid concern. Backs don't last like they used to. And like you said, they kind of have to work a little bit harder for him to produce in some situations, like when he's lining up at wide receiver and he's doing the end arounds and the kind of the nifty little plays like that. It's effective. He's really good at it. But you have to actually set those up, If he runs that end around from that play every time, the defense is going to figure it out. I think they ran that same formation 3 times. They handed it off to Mendenhall up the middle once. I think they passed it once, and then they actually did the end around with Ellington that went for I think that one was about 10 yards. So I'm okay with how they're using him right now. He's getting about the same snaps as Mendenhall. I think they both had 30.
They did both have 30 last
game. Yeah. And I don't know. I think that's probably just about right.
Do you trust Mendenhall then? Do we need to make a change there? Now, I will add this out there. He did have the toe injury, so I do not think that he's 100%. I don't think he's 100%, and that could, because early in the season he did have much more burst. Here's another great stat from Sean, just bringing that in. Of the 8 touchdown drives this season, the Cardinals have rushed 29 times for 130 yards, so 4.5 yards a carry. All the other drives, 86 carries in all the other drives, a little over 3 yards a carry. So maybe 29 times in 8 drives, while the other drives at 86 in all the other drives. Understandably, you can see where the effective is. Yes, they were doing it more often in those drives, but they're also being effective. That's the part that's like, do you want to see them? Yeah. That's a great stat. It is a great debate. More talk is like, well, is it because they're not running effective? They stop running. How much do you force the run if you need to score points and it's not working? So how many times can you run the ball in 1st and 2nd down and leave it for 3rd and 8? That's almost beating your head against the wall to do nothing. But getting back to what I was asking, I was distracted for a second. Rashard Mendenhall, do you want him as your starting running back? Should he be the starting running back? Should he be the number 1 back? Or should it be Stephon Taylor, some people are saying? Should it be this guy that's buried on the depth chart? I believe his name is Ryan Williams. Who would you put up there?
I think I've heard of him. Yeah, that sounds right. Personally, I'm okay with keeping Mendenhall as the number 1 right now because, he's Arian's guy. There's comfort there, obviously. They have a lot of trust in him. I was hoping this week that we would get to see a little bit of Williams because his, Mendenhall against Tampa was just awful. He put the ball on the ground 2 or 3 times. He ran out of bounds when we were trying to control the clock at the end. But that obviously didn't happen. And he bounced back a little bit. He at least protected the ball. He does an okay job getting those kind of grindy, between the tackles runs. He'll get you a couple. He doesn't really lose yardage, it seems like, but he's just,
and that honestly, I'm the most impressed about that because we saw that for so long, just running back after running back for no gain and for his negative gains, loss, same thing. But Mendenhall isn't doing that. He's grinding out an extra couple of yards, and so while he's not always good for a 5-yard or 6-yard carry, he does bust out a 5 or 6 now and again. He just hasn't the burst. Sean shared a few of them on Twitter, some pictures, some graphics, where at least against Carolina, he was going to the outside excessively when he wasn't. And one of the things that Mendenhall supposedly has is good vision. And he wasn't going up to that A gap when it should have, when it was wide open. Instead, he was running to the sideline or the outside for whatever reason. Maybe he didn't see it or he wasn't being patient enough. He wanted to get out there. I don't know if that's the whole question about Ryan Williams. At least with Stephon Taylor has been good on special teams, getting a lot of work there. I don't think he's going to be significantly better. I don't think he'll really be any better than Mendenhall because in the preseason we saw him, he was good for a couple of yards to carry a good burst here and there. He's kind of the same guy. Ryan Williams is the interesting thing. He's buried back there on the depth chart, and I get why. He doesn't play on special teams. Unless you're going to put him in that feature back setting or the number 1 back, he's really kind of worthless to you on game day. And I know I know why they keep him there. That's why they kept him on the roster, because Mendenhall does have a history of injuries. What happens if he goes down? They don't see Andre Ellington as an every down back. I don't think they see Stephon Taylor as an every down back, and I don't think that they see Alphonso Smith as an every down back. Ryan Williams is that one guy, and so they're keeping him on the roster. They're keeping him on the roster with the fact, hey, you have him on the roster, we're going to pay him anyway. So if we cut him now, we have to pay him anyway. Why not keep him? And if Mendenhall has to be gone, best to be missing a game, guess who they can plug in? They can plug in Ryan Williams and get the production. He's the guy that can carry the load to be that lead dog runner. But it begs the question, if Mendenhall's not 100%, should we be putting Ryan Williams in that spot instead? Or since Mendenhall is maybe not 100%, but he's game day able and productive enough, should we still be keeping Ryan Williams inactive for those games?
I mean, hindsight is 2020, and I think we can pretty safely say with the last couple of games, Williams would have been better. I think just about anybody would have been. Going forward, again, I trust Mendenhall. That's fine. If they're going to keep Williams inactive, then they're going to keep him inactive. Talent-wise, I think he's worth keeping around. We've talked about that quite a bit already. It's just what to do with him. And I think you actually tweeted this earlier. Keeping him at 5, that is the decision. That's the decision that's already been made. There's not really much else to decide there. I guess I would like to see Smith and Taylor a little bit more involved on offense. Maybe Vulture, just 3 to 5 carries a game for each of them, just to give them a little bit of a chance and see what they can do, if they can maybe find a few more yards that Mendenhall just doesn't have the burst to clean up.
Well, and honestly, what is happening now, where they got Mendenhall and Ellington, it really jives with what Arians has historically done at the beginning of the season, where you're kind of seeing 3 running backs in the rotation. Really isn't very Arians-like. You get one that picks up 75% of the carries. Then you get one guy that picks up 22% of the carries, and then the third guy that will get just a smidge. And guess what that's turning out? Mendenhall had 17 carries. Mendenhall had 17 carries. Ellington had 7. And then that was pretty much it. And that really kind of goes with how he trends with his running backs. I see why that doesn't happen, but he's getting good special teams. The thing is, are we getting enough from Mendenhall? Do you think that we're going to get enough from Mendenhall over the course of the year? I think eventually we will, because I think he's going to get better. I think he's going to get a little healthier, and so you'll see games where he has that burst and other games where he's not going to have that burst. Now, we move on to the next subject with the defense. That's been the bright spot. The defense has been really good. The defense, correction. We had worries about the defense. I'm not sure what we're worrying about the defense anymore. And I was thinking about today. Granted, Drew Brees kind of really picked them apart. They gave up a lot of yards to Drew Brees. They gave up a lot of yards to Sam Bradford. They gave up a lot of yards to Matthew Stafford. They have the last 2 games. And Cam Newton was throwing for a lot of yards in the first half. The defensive philosophy has changed. Last year, the Cardinals really struggled. They were built to stop teams, where they were built to teams to make one-dimensional. They took away the passing game, and that worked for a lot of teams. That's why they played Atlanta so well. They didn't have a running game. And so when you have a dominant pass defense, but now this year they've got a team that is really stout against the run. What's different? I'm not sure. They've got a really stout team against the run. And guess where that fits better? That goes better with half the teams in this division. Against San Francisco, against Seattle, who are run-first, smash-mouth teams. We've given up some yards, but as we also have seen over the past couple of games, they can get the ball turned over. They're doing better in their coverages. And while in the first half they still got torched by the tight end, that was more than anything. There were a couple of Bruce Arians described it as this: is that Darrell Washington missed a couple of his assignments. He was supposed to be covering. Greg Olsen. Another one was with the crowd noise. Tyrann Mathieu. Well, he said it was our safeties didn't get the play switched around because they shifted formation. It was supposed to change the coverage. He said our young guys back there. So either it was Tyrann Mathieu or was Tony Jefferson who out there back at safety didn't make the communications to change that, and so that's why he had the 5 catches in the first half and then none the rest of the way. How good is our defense, and how good do you think our defense can be? And is it going to be enough? Not necessarily for San Francisco because they've got some offensive issues. They have Anquan Bolden in the pass game and really nobody else. But then you get Seattle, Seattle can be really good. How good is this defense going to be, do you think?
If they keep giving up big yardage through the air, they're not going to end up in the top 10 just because bulk yardage is the main factor there. So, but that's okay because they're playing really, really well and they're doing more than enough to win games, which is just impressive to see. It's a lot of fun watching them. It was the first time we got to see Dansby and Washington together, and they were just amazing. We have some other pieces. Shaughnessy has stepped up at outside linebacker. Patrick Peterson has really turned it on the last couple of games. I think my favorite stat from the Carolina game was that Campbell had at least one pressure against every starting offensive lineman for the Panthers, which was just awesome.
So
just a thorough domination there.
Yes.
I think, yeah.
Well, my question is this. With the linebacker rotation, now you've got Dansby and Washington, which is really kind of interesting because Dansby has when he was in Miami was really a tackle machine. And we knew him in Arizona as a guy that can make plays all over the field. He could pass, he rushed the passer, we could get a few sacks, he could pick up a few passes. That was basically absent when he was in Miami, but he put a lot of tackles, he made a lot of plays, tackled plays, people everywhere. Comes here, first couple of games, kind of the same thing. No sacks, he's had a couple of dropped interceptions, but you insert Washington in that starting lineup, but now you don't have the speed guy, the guy that plays well in space and the thumper like Brinkley, but you've got 2 guys that are really excellent at making plays in space. And oh my gosh, you get 16 tackles, you get 4 sacks, you get 2 interceptions. Are we going to see any other linebackers? It made it as what they didn't leave the field. They didn't come off the field defensively the entire game, which led in part they played base defense for roughly half of the game. They played a 7-man front. Now, part is that's how Carolina runs. So they run a lot of 12 personnel. They didn't put a lot of 3 receiver sets. They didn't do that a ton. But are we going to see Jasper Brinkley again? Do you really? I mean, Bruce Arians said, "Hey, he's a thumper, and this is a thumping game, so he's going to find spots where." Are we going to see a significant, aside from injury, are we going to see significant playing time for Jasper Brinkley ever again this year?
I don't think so. I don't see any reason why we would, honestly. Maybe against running teams you'll want to fit him in on certain downs, but even then, I mean, he's throughout his career he's missed tackles. He's made a career of missing tackles, so even as a run defender, he's not exactly elite. He helps. He's played well for us. I'll say that. I was glad to have him when Washington was out, but yeah, I don't see any reason to ever take Washington or Dansby off the field, really. It's hard you can game plan for one of them, but then you have to deal with the other one. I think we're going to continue to see both of those guys making plays for us, and I think that's pretty exciting.
Well, it's interesting to see just how much more production that Dansby has after Washington comes back, because he's going back and looking like the really young Dansby that he was here when he was in Arizona the first time around, when he was a young player and with those teams under Denny Green and under Wisenhunt. So that rotation is going to be really interesting. And here's a question. Remember the big question at the beginning of the year? Oh, there's lots of. I wish we had Ray. Do you wish you still had Ray Horton around? Does anyone still wish Ray Horton were still here? I'm not sure at this point. Does anyone really wish? Oh wow, dang it! I wish we had Ray Horton still.
I know watching the game, that was pretty much what I was thinking the whole time. Well, Ray Horton, we were glad to have you, but you're no longer missed. It was pretty much a statement game, I think, by the defense, and hopefully they can continue to play this way.
And I honestly,
it's been a little up and down.
And I love the fact that they stopped the run now, because I think that's going to help them more than anything in the division. And that's the staple of really good defenses, is they're really stout against the run. And hopefully the issues they had in the passing game with the assignments has kind of gotten shored up, because I think we're going to see along the rest of the way, as long as everyone stays healthy, that we're going to see a much better performance against the pass. And it's going to be, I'm excited. I'm really excited to see how this is going to turn out. Which leads us to the last topic of the show of the night, and that would be the upcoming schedule. They've gone through now. Granted, they had to play three of the first 4 on the road, and then after playing it here at home against Carolina, they play 4 of the next 5 at home. But this next stretch of 4 games is really, on paper, quite formidable. They go on the road to San Francisco. Then on a short week, come back to host the Seattle Seahawks. Then they host the Atlanta Falcons. That does not seem as big a deal as it used to. Then they have the bye, and then they host the Texans, followed by Indy after that. So that they've got themselves a pretty tough schedule ahead. What do you see as being a minimum, or what you really need to have out of this next 4 games? How many do you really need them to, as a fan? What's going to be the minimum level of acceptance out of those next 4 games? Yeah. I think you're okay if you get 1 win out of those 4. I think you're okay, but really they need to split somehow. They need to split those games, and hopefully they can somehow steal one of those division games. They're not favored on either one of them, and yes, one of them's home. Somehow they need to come away with a win, at least one of those next 2, and then one of the 2 following, and then being 2-2 in that stretch, going into the last stretch of the season at 5-4, and then you're in okay shape. If 4-5, you're still manageable. But for you, what's the minimum of what you want, and what do you really hope they think? Honestly, other than, yes, we want them to go 4 now. What do you need minimally from the Cardinals to still believe in them?
Well, I'm sure the national expectation is for the Cardinals to lose the next 4 games, because national media, that's just kind of how it is when you're a Cardinals fan. But I think we have to admit that even though we have the best record of any of the teams coming up, we still kind of look like underdogs, just because of the offense, I think. Just too many turnovers, and we're just not scoring enough points. But it's not like we're playing Denver. It's not like we're going to have to score 50 points to win here. San Fran and Seattle are always intimidating teams. Even when they were in the past, when they were bad, they always played us tough. But there are some chinks in the armor there. Kaepernick's only throwing 15 to 20 times a game. He's not been exactly lighting it up. Russell Wilson, I think in 3 of his 5 games, he's barely completed 50% of his passes. So that could play right into our defense's hands. Like you were saying, with a new run defense that actually is competent. I think we'll play them really, really hard, and I think those teams could be in for a little bit of a surprise.
Well, then naturally the Falcons game, while at the beginning of the year looked, Atlanta Super Bowl content, but they're 1-4. They're out. It looks like Julio Jones is done for the year. They can't stop anybody in the pass. Look, Geno Smith tore them apart. Geno Smith tore up their secondary. Carson Palmer should be able to do something there. And then the Texans, if Matt Schaub's, things could fall into place for this team. And if they split one of those 2 games, if they somehow win one of those 2 games against the NFC West, those 2 games after that are completely winnable at this point. Look, at this point, they could get things turned around, but Atlanta at home and Houston at home don't look as scary as they did a few weeks ago. 3-1 would be great. And then you put yourself in, you might not be in control of the division, but you're certainly in control of a playoff spot, and that's what Bruce Arians has been talking about this entire time. You're 6-3. If you're 6-3 with 7 games to go, you're in the driver's seat. Then they have some tough road games late in the year, but I'm thinking, And I've been going back and forth. At first, I was like, oh, if we can get one of those games, we'll be okay. I'm being optimistic for two, but now I think if they come away, if they can beat one of these two things, I think if they win one of these next two games, they will go 3-1. I'm feeling pretty confident. If they win one of these next three games, they will go 3. I think if they win one of them, they're going to have the confidence they need. They're gonna beat Atlanta, and they're going to beat Houston, and then we're going to go from there. And it's going to be a good roll in the middle of the season. Personally, that's what I thought was going to happen at the beginning of the year. I thought they would struggle. I would think they would find a groove towards the middle to the later part of the year to find their groove. And my personal prediction is they would kind of fall short at the end because San Francisco and Seattle will be better. But I personally think that 3-1 is very doable. What are your outrageous? I mean, if you had to say, someone is saying you got to tell me how many wins they get. How many wins do they get in the next 4?
I'm gonna put my money in the 2-2 hat. I think, like you said, Atlanta and Houston aren't looking as strong as they probably should be on paper, but they do still have a lot of talent. You know, they're down, but they're not out. I think that our defense is going to be able to keep us in just about every game this year. And as far as I think they should be able to win two of the next 4. I think that's realistic. Hopefully that they win one of the division games, because even if we keep a relatively good record, I think it's going to be tough to get a wild card spot. If that's in the playbooks at the end of if that's in the books at the end of the season, it'll be tough to eke out a wild card spot if we aren't winning within the division. But as long as you come out with 2 wins from this next stretch, I think you'll be okay. We're over 500 right now, and I think the expectation and the goal should be to stay there as long as we can, obviously. And then in the second half of the season, I would say at least 4 of those games that we have, starting with Jacksonville, should be very winnable. So we're in a pretty good spot, I think, for the rest of the season, and I'm going to stick with 2-2 for right now.
2-2. I'm leaning to. I'm confident if we win one of the division games that we will go 3-1 in that stretch. Which means if we don't, then obviously they'll go 2-2. But I feel also they could, if they lose both of those games, it could steamroll into 1-3 as well. That's where I really want one of those. So we talked about a lot of things tonight, Ben, but we're time to close up the show. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ben, for coming on tonight. It's been a great talk as always, and we'll be back in a couple of days with our Cardinals 49ers preview show. Thank everyone for listening. If you're listening live, thank you. Listen to it again. Download it on iTunes. If you are listening to it after the fact, thank you very much. That means you took the time to find us and download us and take a listen. We appreciate it. That's this on behalf of Ben and myself, Jess Root. This is Revenge of the Birds Radio, signing out for the week. You've been listening to Revenge of the Birds. Keep the conversation going by visiting revengeofthebirds.com. Follow us on Twitter at Revenge of Birds. You can also find us on iTunes at facebook.com/Revenge of the Birds.